Welcome everyone to Rocket Academy Q&A. We have a really special guest today. You rarely get to see and hear from this person. Yeah. Let's see, what should I say about myself? Akira, can you introduce me?
Yeah, Akira should do the introduction.
Yeah.
This is Kai. He is the guru in charge of Rocket Academy, and yeah, I don't know what do you want me to say. He started Rocket Academy because he saw a need in Southeast Asia and previously has some teaching experience from his time at Stanford, and has a lot of experience to share with everyone, from working in America and Indonesia and also in Singapore. Anything else?
Yeah, I'm really excited to see everyone here succeed. And I hope that through Rocket Academy, we can create a valuable and powerful alumni network in Singapore and in the region so that people who are trying to get into software or get into tech can leverage this network to succeed in their careers. Yeah, that's one of my goals for Rocket Academy. Cool. Okay, I think we can. I think what else? Is there anything else? Okay, maybe I'll just also briefly talk about the stuff that the journey that I've been through in the last few years. So I studied computer science at Stanford from 2010 to 2015. I did an undergrad and a master's. Undergrad in pretty general things, but I did somewhat focus on computer systems, which includes networking, computer networking, operating systems, and compilers to a certain extent. I stayed around at Stanford to do a master's, and I was focusing on artificial intelligence. At the time, it was really relatively early days of this concept called deep learning, which has now come to just kind of define the field of machine learning. And so I didn't go very deep into that topic, but I did a fair amount of work in computer vision and graph algorithms during my time when I was studying AI during the master's. After I graduated, I did nothing related to AI at all. I knew I wanted to. So during uni, I interned at Facebook, I interned at Alibaba in China, and through those experiences, I think it was mostly a learning experience for me. And through those experiences, I think I learned a lot about how the tech companies work, a lot of the so-called best practices that they use at companies like Facebook, including things like code review, including things like testing, including things like decomposition of different features or different apps into different parts of the entire code base. So those were, and of course, documentation. And after I graduated, I knew I wanted to work at a smaller company. I knew I wanted to work at, ideally, a smaller startup so that I could get a better idea of how the business works end to end. I think I had an inclination that I wanted to be somewhat entrepreneurial and do my own thing after a while. So I wanted to join a smaller company where I get more exposure to how things work from end to end. And so I joined, at the time, a few of my good friends from uni had joined this healthcare company in San Francisco called Nuna Health. And it seemed like they were having a really good time. And when I interviewed with them, I was very impressed because the interviewers were all very experienced and knowledgeable, and the questions they asked were very challenging. And so that combined with the fact that the company had a strong mission that I identified with, trying to make healthcare more affordable and high quality in the US. The team, the mission, and I think the expertise, the experience of the engineering team really kind of sold me to join that company. I worked at the company for almost 2 years. I think it was one of the greatest learning experiences of in my life. Yeah, I think just having mentors, having experienced people to show me how to do things in a good way, I think was a great learning experience. And along the way, the company was growing, so the company doubled in size while I was there. So we got to see some of the growing pains, how they restructure the teams as the company grows. So that was one of the best experiences. Toward the end of that stint, I decided that I wanted to return to Singapore because I'm Singaporean, but I didn't grow up in Singapore. I grew up in Hong Kong and the US because my parents were working there. And so I felt this need to come back to Singapore and kind of spend some time here to spend more time with my extended family and get to know Singapore better. And when I came back, I couldn't think of a company that I was super passionate about working for. So I decided to start my own. And I've been on this entrepreneurial journey since 2017, where I started a healthcare company in 2017. It worked on that for about a year. Wasn't really going anywhere. It's difficult to make money in healthcare if you're not kind of providing medical services yourself. And in late 2018, I decided to join a friend's company in Jakarta doing student loans. I really wanted to learn more about Indonesia because it seemed like this huge promising market. It's right next to Singapore, important for Singapore long-term and important for Southeast Asia. So I moved to Jakarta end of 2018 to join this friend's company. This friend is Singaporean, also went to Stanford, and their company was funded by Y Combinator, and it seemed like they really needed, they could use tech expertise to kind of take it off the ground. I was there for almost a year. I think during that time, we saw that the tech became relatively stable and that the bottleneck was more on the business side. And so at that point in time, I was like, okay, I think I'm ready to come out and try and do my own thing again. And so there were a couple months where I was floating around in Indonesia, trying to figure out this is in 2019, trying to figure out what idea and what team I wanted to work on and with. And in the end, I decided that there was this opportunity to fill the demand for software engineers, not just in Indonesia, but also in Singapore. I decided that Singapore was a better place to start because I decided Singapore was a better place to start because of language, I just teaching English, because of the generally higher education levels, generally better internet connectivity, because I knew I wanted to be an online school. And then also my girlfriend, now wife at the time, was also moving back to Singapore at the time. So it made sense for us both to be in Singapore. And so, so late 2019 was when the idea for Rocket Academy was conceived. Initially, I wanted to copy what Lambda School had been doing in the US, where they have an online longer bootcamp as well. And the idea since early 2020, when we started our first batch, our pilot batch 0, as we're calling it now, we have been adapting it, just improving the course and adapting it. Luckily managed to convince Akira to join middle of 2020, which was a lifesaver for the company. I don't know if we'd be around if Akira wasn't here. And then luckily also was able to convince all the people here to be part of this journey as well, and super proud and excited of everything that everyone's achieved so far and where everyone's going. Oh, okay, that was a long spiel about my journey. Cool. I think we can open up to questions, if any, and if you don't have questions, fine. We can just end early.
Yeah, maybe I'll start. Hi, Kai. Yeah, so I was just looking at your website from the dementia one. I think it's really a really nice site. Like in terms of like tech and all that kind of thing, like how do you how do you come up with this idea, and like how do you use like what you knew,
Yeah, at the time when I started working on the healthcare idea, it wasn't about dementia. It was about senior care. I wanted to help families coordinate care for their older adults in the families remotely, because I realized that a lot of kids don't necessarily. If you hear any renovation, so I wanted to help. I realized a lot of people kind of live in different places from their parents, not just within the same city, not just across cities like in the US, right? the younger generation will move to the bigger cities or whatnot, and everywhere in China. And so and ends up being families get separated across cities, and I wanted a way for people to be able to get medical, but also medical related help for older adults remotely, coordinate that. And it ended up that's when I started, and then I realized that okay, there were other companies such as Homage, such as Jagami, kind of on-demand nursing care in Singapore that were already doing something similar. And so I thought that okay, maybe, and there are a couple pivots involved. I thought that maybe we would want to do something more software specific because that's my expertise. And then while I was working in this space, I met my co-founder at the time. Her name is Melissa. And Melissa has a lot of family experience with dementia because her dad had dementia. And she had been trying to actively build resources for families with dementia for a while. And so we decided to join forces. I thought that, okay, with me bringing the tech skills, her bringing the domain expertise, then we could build something valuable for families from there. And so that's how we landed on the idea of dementia. And in terms of tech, I think it was always really nebulous what role tech would play. I think almost all of the time in early stage startups, the bottleneck is not the tech. The bottleneck is the business demand. And at that time, what Project We Forgot was a community of family caregivers, so people like us who might have parents with Alzheimer's who are just looking for support and looking for tips on what are the best ways, what are the best resources to help our parents kind of live happily while they might have dementia, that kind of thing. And so there wasn't actually that much tech involved. Initially, it was mostly like over these kinds of social media channels. Initially we were thinking maybe we want to create our own social media group, and there was this debate about whether we wanted to use Facebook groups or roll our own version of Facebook groups that had dementia specific features. In the end, there was a point in time where I was actually coding this, trying to build a social network essentially, which sounds really silly in hindsight. And I spent maybe a month on that. And at the time I was like learning, I was coding React Native. So I was like learning React Native and all that stuff. And then we discovered that, actually there was a company in the US that had, and it was called Mighty Networks, that had created a software as a service for this kind of social network. And so when we discovered that, I was like, wow, this Mighty Networks thing does 80% of what we want to do anyway. And so there's really not a strong reason for us to code and maintain our own social network, so to say. And so at that point, actually, that 1 month of work, we actually just put it aside, and we didn't need to use it anymore. And then went to use this more or less off-the-shelf social network. And then after that, that was around late 2017. I was like, okay, we have this social network now. We can build our community on this group-like platform, which is great. It was tough to attract more people on the platform because it's a new platform. People are already on Facebook. It's difficult to get people onto a new platform. We were thinking about what more software could we, it's kind of silly. What more could we build leveraging tech and software to support these families? And at that point in time, one of the hypotheses that we had was that, okay, people want kind of personalized tips. And we were thinking that, one group that we want to support are people who feel very lonely when they're caring for their loved one with Alzheimer's, and maybe in the middle of the night, right? These kind of off hours where nobody else is online, they want to get help. And so we thought that, okay, maybe one way to help them get help easier would be to build a chatbot, like an informational chatbot that can kind of summarize relevant advice for you when you're stuck and you have a question, like, oh, something bad is happening, how do I deal with this, that kind of thing. And also kind of sad in hindsight, I worked on this for like maybe 3 months. I can't remember how the time went at the time. So this is a lesson of what not to do. I worked on that for maybe about 3 months. At somewhere toward the end of that, only to realize after we were testing it with with customers and whatnot, or our end users, that the information that the chatbot would be able to provide was not necessarily more, it was not necessarily better than what you would have gotten from a Google search, basically. And actually, the most valuable information for those people at the time would have been information that you can't get from Google. And so what is information that you can't get from Google? It's information that is from the local people that have been through that situation themselves, which at happenstance happens to be actually people that were already on our social network. So in the end, this whole chatbot thing actually didn't really make sense, because the information that you would not have been able to get from just Googling was in the network. And so there wasn't really any need to have this separate chatbot that was just regurgitating what you might have been able to get from Google anyway. So in the end, that we kind of pivoted back to focus more on the community and growing the community, because we realized that was actually the main value of what we were building. But then we were like, how do we make money, right? Initially, we were thinking we were going to monetize the community in some way, but the community never grew beyond maybe 100 or so people. And so it just didn't seem like something that was going to be nearly big enough to, have advertisers beyond this platform or something like that. And so in the end, toward the end of when I was working on that, I was like, okay, maybe we want to pivot more into being something like a marketplace, right? Because we were thinking about internet business models, right? There's ads, there's marketplace, there's software as a service. And so we're thinking, okay, what do caregivers need? They need these kinds of services and products to care for their loved ones with Alzheimer's. And so what if we can be a connector, kind of this portal where people can come to access these services, and we take a cut when people access these services. And so we're going that direction. But then around that time, there were some disagreements between Melissa and me, and it just didn't seem like this was going to be a huge market or a huge potential. And so at that time, I decided, okay, I think this is the right time for me to walk away. And I think Melissa was happy also running Project We Forgot as this kind of community effort on the side, not necessarily as a business itself, but as a support community for people in this situation. Yeah, so that was the journey. There was like some coding involved, but it was more, if anything, it was more prototyping, because none of the actual technology involved ended up being used in the final product that the end users are using.
Thanks, Kai.
Yeah, so that is the challenge with technology, which is that often at early stage startups, the difficulty is finding what the customers want. It's not so much building the thing. Building the thing is easier, so to say.
Thanks, Kai.
Yeah, I guess I think this is relevant to what you mentioned about what customers want. So when thinking of the curriculum of Rocket Academy, right? How do you prioritize what to teach, or how do you know like what was better to instill in us?
Yeah, good question. So, good question. When I was thinking about the curriculum from the early, and so before I say anything, I have to give a lot of credit to Akira, because Akira came up with a lot of the inspiration for the curriculum and a lot of the details in terms of the exercises and all. So Akira deserves a lot of credit. When I was starting out with Rocket Academy before Akira joined, the way I was thinking about the curriculum was from first principles, right? As an entry-level software engineer, what are the most important things for people to know? And so I actually went out and looked up a bunch of bootcamp curriculums, some of the top bootcamps internationally, looked at what they were teaching, and I compared that with my own experience as a software engineer when hiring software engineers. What do I want them to know when I'm hiring software engineers? And these things came down to a few categories that I thought would be helpful for everyone. And these categories were front end, so understanding how user interfaces work, how to build user interfaces, that kind of thing. Back end, right? So what happens on the servers behind the scenes when the servers are managing data? How do they store the data? That kind of thing. Cloud infrastructure. cloud infrastructure in the sense that, okay, in the olden days, right, every company had their own set of servers in their office, but nowadays it's all in the cloud. And so modern software engineers need to know how the cloud works, how to manage machines on the cloud. And then the rest of them were other topics that I thought were relevant that we've since realized may be less important in terms of foundations. I think data structures and algorithms remains one of those topics that is still important, but there were other topics such as computer systems, right? Like how operating systems work, how computer networking works, that I realized, okay, actually, there's no need to go into too much depth in those topics, or even mobile and data science. Reason being, once we learn the core concepts of front end and back end through the context of web applications, where we learn web applications not to be web developers, but to understand the concepts of front end and back end. Web applications just happens to be an easier entry point, an easier way to get introduced to front end and back end, which is why we're starting with that. So concepts like mobile and even data science, right? Scripting or writing data science scripts. Those are kind of extensions of the existing front end and back end work that we're already doing. And with the data science work, a lot of it is actually just algorithms, right? So actually by learning data structures and algorithms, we're already preparing ourselves to be able to do this kind of data science or data analytics work where we may import machine learning libraries and use those as part of our scripts. Yeah, so it came from first principles, right? When I was working as a software engineer, when I'm hiring software engineers, what concepts do I want them to be aware of? And those were the key concepts that we decided to put in place in Rocket Academy's curriculum.
Yeah, I agree with you because ultimately, like the other concepts like data science are not really what we are trying to aim for at the start, right? It's more of a software engineering.
Right, we're trying to give people a general skill set such that no matter what kind of software engineering you want to do, you can succeed in that on your own post Rocket Academy. Right, like if you wanted to learn about Java, you have all the learning skills to go learn about Java on your own after the course. If you want to go learn about, I mean, there are infinite number of these things, right? If you want to learn about mobile, if you want to learn about blockchain, if you want to learn about cybersecurity, right? I mean, there's no way we can teach all of these things in a bootcamp course, but the idea is to give people the most important core learning skills and concepts that they can then use those to learn everything else on their own. Yeah. So what are these skills? Yeah.
I think you did achieve what you set out to do with us. So I'm very thankful and grateful for that. One question though, what is one advice you would give your younger self? Like let's say when you were
as an entrepreneur or a software engineer?
As a software engineer with all that you know now.
As a software engineer. Wow. I think there was to answer a side question, I think there was a turning point in my career. I think it was during my time at Nuna. It wasn't even during my internships. It was during my time at Nuna, maybe about a year after I started work, where I realized that, or at least I felt that there was nothing that couldn't be solved. Of course, I mean, there are really big problems in the world like poverty and all that, it's very difficult to be solved. But like technically, technically, right, there's nothing that can't be solved given time. And I think that every one of you here will hopefully come to feel this way eventually. I've heard other software engineers say the same thing as well, right? Like once you've unlocked the power of Google, like being able to just figure things out on your own, it's not even about coding anymore. It's like you can literally figure out how to like clean your car or like fix your car or like fix your window, like everything, everything is figure outable. Yeah. And so I think it took some time because during uni, back to your question, Kendrick, during uni, I think there were a lot of times where I was just like stuck on this bug and I was like banging my head against the wall and like my friends and I would like stay up all night and still wouldn't be able to figure it out. And we'd just be kind of like sad, right? Because like, are we like stupid or what's going on? But after some experience and after working at some companies where you understand how people kind of debug and systematically debug problems, I've come to feel that there's actually no problem that we can't solve given time. And yeah, that's what I actually hope to impart to everyone here, which is that skill, right? Systematically be able to debug things such that there's no problem that you cannot solve given time. Yeah, so back to your question about what advice would I give to my former self. I don't know, everything is possible. It will all make sense. I don't know. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Kai.
Yeah.
Funny, I guess. I guess I want to ask one question about the tech scene in Singapore, because I feel that you've been talking to a lot of people in the industry as well.
Yeah.
So I wanted to know, like, what are your thoughts on the Singapore tech scene if you were to want to compare it to San Francisco?
Yeah.
SF, and that's usually where all the tech and all the startups are. Do you feel that Singapore is sort of going towards that direction? We're still like booming in a way.
Okay, maybe we should talk about what Silicon Valley actually is, right? Silicon Valley is like a global HQ for tech. So I think there is very little chance that even in like 50 years, Singapore will be as big or successful as Silicon Valley. Reason being, there are many reasons for this, historical reasons, right? Some of the earliest tech companies came out of Silicon Valley. Now there's this very, very strong ecosystem going there. The US market is a massive market, so companies want to be in the US to tackle the US market. Right. So right now, I would say maybe Silicon Valley and maybe some of the hubs in China are going to be kind of this like the main hubs. I guess London is probably a big one as well. Berlin is a small one. Israel is a small one. Singapore is also a small one, right? So they're kind of a couple big ones like Silicon Valley and maybe Beijing and Shanghai or Shenzhen. And then a couple smaller ones like London, Berlin. London's kind of medium, I guess, and then smaller ones like Berlin, Israel, Singapore. Yeah. And so it's really difficult to rival that concentration of talent, capital, and talent, capital, and kind of expertise. I guess that's kind of talent as well. Talent and capital in Silicon Valley. It's just such a because you're literally getting the best people from all over the world and the most money from all over the world to like be in this one place. Yeah. So in terms of talent, it's actually quite difficult to compare Singapore with Silicon Valley because in Silicon Valley you're trying to get the best people from all over the world. In Singapore, we're kind of getting the best people, but relatively locally, whether it's from Southeast Asia or Singapore itself. And so there's a bit of a gap in terms of, and it's not even about intelligence, right? A lot of it is actually about experience because Silicon Valley and this whole tech ecosystem has existed in Silicon Valley for way longer than Singapore started on Smart Nation and all these things, right? Prior to Smart Nation, right, everyone wanted to work in finance because finance pays the best, and kind of software engineers are more like the IT staff who fix your printer, fix your networking, that kind of thing. It was only with the advent of these tech companies like Facebook and all that, where Singaporeans have started to pay attention to like, oh, actually, software applications can make money or make more money, something like that. Yeah. So we're relatively young and new to this space, which is part of the reason why there's this talent gap as well. And then of course we can see the government today taking actions like offering this visa for like very highly skilled, highly paid foreigners to come to Singapore to teach all of us, which is awesome, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
In terms of companies, I think it will also be difficult for Singapore to match big markets like the size of US, China, or even India in terms of the types of tech companies we do. Like tech companies thrive on scale. right? It doesn't make sense to build a social network for 5 people or 50 people or even 500 people, right? It only really works when you have like 5 million people or more, on it. And it's just difficult. I mean, Singapore only has 5 million population, right? It's just, yeah. So it's gonna be, right, and we may have heard this a lot already, right? Tech companies that want to succeed from Singapore, most of the time have to be regional, or in Southeast Asia in general have to be regional, maybe with the exception of Indonesia, where you see companies doing really well just in Indonesia itself. Tech companies, I mean. Yeah. So Singapore has its fair share of kind of uphill battles to come with working in tech, right? Because we're kind of, yes, we're not bad, right? We have good talent and we're kind of the regional expert in this area, but the markets are relatively small compared with US, China, and India. So we may not ever reach that kind of scale, right? So what happens in those markets is that they have these local tech companies that kind of dominate the local markets, and then they expand internationally. Whereas, and the dominating local market can make them already like unicorns, right? Whereas in Singapore, it's relatively more difficult, right? Because we have to go to other markets quite soon in order to achieve some kind of scale. Yeah. Does that answer your question? In terms of, but it doesn't mean, and it doesn't mean that we're doomed, right? Because there are always going to be people that want to live in Southeast Asia, want to contribute to Southeast Asia, right? Not everybody wants to move to the US. And so we will, and the goal, I think that Singapore government, and I think many of us have in mind, is to make Singapore, we don't have to necessarily have to be the next Silicon Valley of the world. And we may not ever be the Silicon Valley of the world, but at least we can be the best in our part of the world. And we can build, we can target specific niches, like for example, in biotech, right? Singapore is only targeting very specific niches to be the best at. So within tech, right, we can build certain companies, right? There have been companies that have been the best at their particular niche. Like there's some Shopify app that some Singaporean made, right? That like sold for hundreds of millions of dollars. We've had Singaporean companies sell to Google, Zendesk, so on and so forth. We have local champions like Grab and Sea, right? Carousel. So I think there's still a good promise in being the best in our part of the world. Yeah.
Okay. My main question was that is it in your opinion like still exciting? The tech scene in Singapore.
Silicon Valley or Singapore?
In Singapore, because
absolutely. I think it's very exciting.
I think it's very exciting.
Yeah, we're literally at the beginning of things. Yeah. Because Smart Nation and that whole drive only started like less than 10 years ago. And right, like you all, the reason why you all are here is because there are not enough software engineers, right? People want to build things, but there's just not enough people to build things. And hopefully, right, you guys, after you graduate a few years out, you'll become more senior, and you will also start to find these niches that you want to work on, and you'll be, through your work, you'll be coaching and teaching other people as well. And this will just have a multiplier effect, right? What that means is that Singapore and Southeast Asia will be able to build tech products that can be sold on an international scale, and hopefully, help us stand on our own. Yeah. Right. The alternative is, if we don't have this tech talent, the alternative is that we kind of don't have this capability ourselves, and we keep having to buy software products from other countries for everything, and then. Yeah, I guess it's general business theory, right? And we we're the takers and we're not the givers. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have one question, Kai. So with regards to like how Rocket Academy's syllabus is set up, all the students who come out of Rocket Academy, you've said, are going to become full stack developers.
Yeah.
And is there?
When I say going to become, I mean they have the capability to work as full stack developers anywhere and succeed as full stack developers anywhere they go.
Yeah. So seeing how like Lambda School, like there are other boot camps that separate out like front and like front end development and
Lambda School doesn't. Yeah, Lambda School is just, they just have a web dev and they have a data science. That's it. Yeah.
Do you think there's like some benefit to like having people who are also just like very focused on like front end development? And
I think so.
There are like bootcamps that do like kind of like 6 months of that, and like pros and cons of like how you've decided to set it up this way.
Yeah. Good point. And some context is that Sam is a designer, and I think wants, correct me if I'm wrong, Sam, wants to, after Rock Academy, wants to focus more on front end software engineering work as well. Why did we choose to build a full stack course? One, because it's easier to build one course than it is to build 2 courses. So building a one-size-fits-all course is easier than trying to build a like super expert front-end course and then a super expert back-end course. I suppose we could have tried to separate them, and like, so if you want to do full stack, you kind of take both courses. But in reality, I would say there isn't such a strict separation between front-end and back-end. I would say everything that we're learning in Rocket Academy's course, all front-end engineers should know, and all back-end engineers should also know. Because the stuff we're covering in these 6 months of bootcamp is still like relatively like basic, and I would say the advanced front-end material, right? Like building your own versions of Bootstrap or something, your own kind of CSS framework that your company can use. That's something that an advanced, so-called somewhat advanced front-end engineer might do. Or, for example, optimizing the state in a React app such that it can be performant on really slow internet connections. That is an example of something that an advanced front-end engineer would also do. So it's not just about like designing UIs and making CSS and that kind of thing. And right, there's way more advanced stuff on backend that we're not learning in this course, right? Like how to use queues as a data structure for kind of real-time data. We don't really do much with sockets either, kind of real-time data as well. Yeah, there are many different kinds of databases out there. There are many different kinds of scalable systems out there that we're not learning about for backend as well. So all this to say, I wanted to give people the core skill set that they need to succeed as whatever software engineer that they want. And I believe that everything we're learning in bootcamp is necessary for people that want to be front-end engineers, let alone back-end engineers or full-stack engineers. Even if you only wanted to be a front-end engineer, all the stuff that we're doing with Node.js, with databases, I think is relevant for front-end engineers to know, because if you're only kind of siloed into working on front-endy things, you kind of still need a sense of the bigger picture. Yeah, does my reasoning make sense? Huh?
Yeah, it makes sense. Thanks.
And then so after the course, I'm hoping that, okay, for people that want to go deeper into front-end, right, become experts about how the performance works in a React app, or how to completely customize a CSS framework, that those are things that people should be able to figure out on their own with the learning skills that they picked up from Rocket Academy.
Okay. So I think it's safe to say that we can all trust the system. Thank you.
As we are teaching the course, we are actively thinking about, oh, is this necessary? Is this not necessary? So far, everything has been quite, built fundamental. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Like that, to me as a new batch, I think that's the confidence that we need and we get. So it's good.
I think batch 3 doesn't have much to worry about, because batch 1 we did kind of like a hard work.
There were a decent number of bugs.
So we kind of we feedback a lot. So your course notes should be a lot better, and certain things that we feel
compile all the interview questions for you guys. Yeah.
Yeah, and also like certain things like we feel that it needs to be known, we always feedback and we always tell client Akira. So I think batch 3, you guys should not be so worried. Yeah. And we are all relatively doing okay with our job search, I guess. So yeah. So batch 3, you guys are in good hands.
Yeah, 2 of us found jobs already, so yeah, quite well paying too.
Pretty much everybody has offers, right? It's not just the 2 of them have kind of decided, but everybody else.
But yeah, like most of us has offers already. Just that we are trying to find like better offers. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Nice.
Hi, I just wanted to ask, and it's actually related to Jerome's question on your work on that healthcare thing. So, I think as a builder of something, you might come to a point where you realize that what you're building, or where you need to make a decision whether to continue building or not, or to like give up on the idea. And at sometimes I think it must feel like, you're just going to 3 weeks worth of effort or 3 months worth of effort is going down the drain. It feels like you're killing your baby or something like that. So what's a good mindset to have when approaching these kinds of situations? Like, knowing that you have to do it, but at the same time there's a lot of like, you don't want to do it, and it feels like it's a wasted effort if you do that.
Yeah, I mean, really, it comes down to, is this, I mean, code, and my philosophy is also that code is bad, right? Like, and Akira sometimes disagrees with me on this, but generally when I can avoid writing code, I will avoid writing code, because code needs to be maintained, right? If you just leave code on its own, eventually it's going to stop working. And so with the case of, for example, the chatbot that I was talking about earlier for the dementia thing, right? Like, or even the social network that I was thinking of building, it takes a lot of resources. I mean, one software engineer is going to cost, right, many thousands of dollars, right? And it takes a lot of resources to just maintain, let alone build new features on a product. And so if there is a third-party product out there that does 80% of what you want to do, that only costs you a couple tens of dollars a month, that's a huge cost saving compared with trying to roll your own and build your own, right? Because if you are a software engineer, your time, if you divide your salary by the number of hours that you're working, your time is more valuable than that. And so it comes down at the end to ROI, right? Like, are you gonna get, if you roll your own thing, are you gonna get substantially more ROI out of it than if you just use the off-the-shelf tool? Yeah. And so if you're going to roll your own thing and it's going to cost you way more money, then like, well, does that make sense for the company? Factoring your own salary as the cost of building and developing that thing. Yeah, for example, right, like Uber, this is a relatively famous story, right? Like Uber had their own internal chat app for the majority of their existence. And there was an entire engineering team, I don't know how many tens or even 100 of engineers were working on this internal chat app at Uber, just maintaining this app for Uber to use internally. And at some point, I can't remember what the turning point was, but at some point, basically, I think in like maybe 5 years or 4 or 5 years ago, they decided to switch wholesale to Slack. Because I think Uber, I don't know, was coming under some flag, they're not profitable, so they need to cut costs or whatever. And they identified this entire engineering team that was building Slack internally, right? And it's just and they're like, wow, we really don't need this. And they just like cut the entire project, and everybody else just got resent to other teams or laid off or whatnot. And they just bought Slack. I mean, not bought Slack, but like signed up as a customer for Slack. Yeah, so it's not just at small companies where this happens, also at bigger companies. It's just about ROI of working on that product. Yeah, and of course, I'm sure it was hugely painful for that entire team who had been building this chat thing for so long. But in the end, it made sense for the business. Yeah, and I think it comes down to considerations of what is the core competency, right? If Uber was a chat company and they decided to stop working on chat and buy Slack's solution, then like that makes sense. But Uber's core competency is not chat, right? Uber's core competency, I don't know what it is. It's network effects from the drivers and riders. Yeah, so they really didn't need to spend that money to build their own chat app. Likewise, for Project We Forgot, the dementia thing, our core competency was not I realized our core competency wasn't the chatbot, right? It was the community of caregivers and the support that we provide to them. And the chatbot was kind of auxiliary to that.
Hi, I have a question for you.
Yes.
How is your experience from being a software engineer to a teacher now? How was the transition?
I think it's not too different. It's honestly not super different. And the reason I say that is okay, maybe when I was like a earlier stage software engineer working at Facebook and then working at Nuna, a lot of it was kind of me just trying to get as many hours in the day in focused time where nobody disturbs me and I kind of just code out something. But especially when I was working in Indonesia as a relatively more senior engineer, a lot of my time was spent managing the team and trying to hire people and trying to make sure that the team kind of had a good set of foundations to work on and had kind of best practices. And that honestly was not too different from what we do at Rocket Academy now. Yeah. So hopefully when you guys go and join companies and work, you will be, and this is my goal as well, is to have everyone here surrounded by people on the team who have some experience and some understanding of best practices so that you can kind of learn through osmosis from them and they can coach you as well. Continue to coach you in a similar way, maybe more hands-off to the way that we're doing at Rocket Academy now. That's also why I always encourage everyone to post your questions in Slack first before you say, like, hey, can we get on Zoom? Because that's exactly the process that you're going to be going through at the companies when you need to learn and ask for help, because people are not going to be, they're not going to be like ready. You can't just like tap on their shoulder any time of day because they could be busy doing something or meeting or whatever. And so we just have to get used to articulating our problems over Slack and getting help that way. Yeah. So the more senior you get, actually, the more teaching and coaching and mentoring that you're going to do as a software engineer.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks.
Just now mentioned on how Uber had a whole team to maintain their own internal like Slack application. Just wondering, what kind of work goes behind maintenance of code? Because I want to what's the maintenance part? Is it debugging?
Good. Yeah, really, really good question. So Yixing's question was what work goes into maintaining a piece of code? Yeah, really good question. It depends. It depends on what kind of application we're talking about. At the very fundamental level, it's just like, okay, there are gonna be bugs that you didn't discover before. And so somewhere along the line, like some customer is going to discover some bug that you didn't anticipate, and then you're going to fix that bug. So that's like at a very basic level, what needs to be done with maintenance. In somewhat more complicated cases, it's like technology is changing, and right, so the company's technology stack is never standing still, right? So some part of the stack is always being upgraded to a new version or some new technology. Someone's always like replacing some piece of the stack with some new advanced piece of thing. And those have interdependencies, and the different components of our entire software system have interdependencies that we cannot always anticipate ahead of time. So for example, maybe your chat app runs on the system, but then Uber decides to replace and switch from AWS to GCP for whatever reason, or they decide that, okay, we want all of our EC2 machines to be a certain type, and they might switch something out that might affect the chat app in some other way. The alternative is to, the chat app, have it be in its own complete silo where it's just never touched. But then that also becomes very expensive to maintain, right? Because maybe those servers are more outdated and they become more expensive because they're less used. Like this is a similar issue that the airline industry is facing today, where a lot of the infrastructure was built in the late 1900s or mid to late 1900s, and they just haven't bothered to upgrade it because they're so scared of upgrading it because this data, so the systems are so sensitive And as a result, all the languages that they use are outdated, and so all the engineers that understand these languages are all dead. And,
oh no.
And so it just becomes really expensive for them to hire people that understand and can work with these technologies. And so alternative is that, okay, you just become outdated over time. It just costs you even more to maintain this old stuff.
So under maintenance, so you mean it's possible that you have to rewrite everything in a different language?
Yeah, like you can't just, you can't just keep things the way they are because the world is changing. Yeah, and keeping things the way they are, it will slowly die and stop working over time. So you always have to like be keeping up with the new technology. Yeah, like imagine if it were built on floppy disks, right? Then like no computer now can read floppy disks. So then the whole thing would just not stop working after a while.
Thank you.
Yeah. Floppy disks were only like 20 years ago, by the way, 30 years ago. Yeah.
Cool.
Other than all the coding skills and stuff that tech skills, basically, what are some vital skills that you see that that generally is needed
yeah
this
has come up, and for the batch 3 guys, maybe you guys haven't heard this as much, but this kind of soft skills component has come up quite a bit in the RA Q&As over the last few months. And I think actually, what's his name? Alan from Versent put it in a really good way in the end, when he was saying that the biggest difference between people who succeed and don't succeed as entry-level software engineers is your networking skills, not computer networking, your human networking skills. Right. And the example that he gave was that he has one sibling who got a job even before she graduated from a boot camp, and because she just went and talked to as many people as she could and got to know as many people in the industry as possible, which is what we're trying to do here with Rocket Academy Q&A, is just introducing everyone to experienced engineers from the industry. And the alternative is his other sibling who right has graduated from boot camp for half a year and hasn't found a job yet because he's not really kind of outgoing and seeking out those opportunities or relationships on his own. So that's one thing, networking, in terms of building your network and finding, and Akira can point to this as well, right? I think for both of us, the majority of the opportunities we've been given as software engineers have been through referrals, not necessarily through direct applications to companies. And that's, I was talking about Nuna and how some of my close university friends work there, right? That's generally how you can, how so-called good opportunities come about, is when you have friends who are already doing these things. They kind of pull you in, that kind of thing. Yeah. And then, right, and I think another point that we want to emphasize at Rocket Academy is communication. It's something that we screen for in basics, right? Everybody here, most people here have been through basics, and it's something that we kind of actively look for now when we are choosing who to accept into bootcamp or not, is communication skills, not just your verbal and written communication skills, but also in your code, right? Can you pick meaningful names for your variables? Can you document your code properly with comments that actually make sense? These kind of things make a huge, it's just so important as a software engineer, right? It's not even about whether, of course your program has to work, but so much of the work as software engineer is just making sure your team is on the same page, and variable names and comments and your written communication documentation, your, just your proactiveness in sharing information with other people, it makes a huge difference in that. Yeah. So in terms of your question, beyond technical skills, what matters the most? I would say it's those kind of networking and communication skills. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Kai.
Okay, I think I'm gonna wrap this up so that we don't take up too much of your time. In terms of final advice, I usually wrap up. I say, what final advice would you give to bootcamp grads? And oh man, what advice would I give? get to know, yeah, really put yourself out there, get to know. I know that all of you are working hard on doing what you're doing and you're focused on learning, so I don't have to repeat that. I would say everybody in this room, right, try and build relationships with everybody here in Rocket Academy, the alumni network, because, and I also say this, you know, when people are applying to uni and they ask me like, oh, what's the most valuable thing about uni? It's the relationships, it's the network, it's the people that you work with. So during your time here at Rocket Academy and beyond, try and, especially during your time at Rocket Academy, try and enjoy and build the relationships you have with your peers, so that because in these times and memories you have together will be invaluable. In the future, yes, you all might go off and work at separate companies, but you're always going to need help from one another in some way or other, right? Maybe you have a friend that wants to work at another alumnus company or something, you can get a referral for them. Maybe you want to join that company yourself. Maybe you're stuck on this very difficult technical problem at your company, but this other alums company has already done that problem, so you can ask for help from them. Right? There's so many things that you can share and get out of the community, and so the better bonds and relationships we build during this time, the stronger that will be in the long term. And this doesn't just apply to Rocket Academy. This applies to kind of all of your jobs when you're talking to companies in the future. Keep in touch with those recruiters. Keep in touch with the engineers you chat with, because they will be you'll be able to help them. They'll be able to help you in the future in the long term as well.
Thanks, Kai.
Awesome. Back to coding.